We'll start with our look at the calendar. We are in the midst of our 4-day block on voting theory. Again, I can't imagine a more appropriate time to talk about this. We've got all the Republican primaries happening, and then this is a presidential election year. So the voting method that we introduced last class was this method called plurality, which should be very familiar because probably it's the only method you have ever seen. And that's where you count only which kind of votes? First place votes. And whoever has do we need a majority to win? No, you don't have to have a majority. You just have to have more than everybody else, right? You might have a majority, but you don't need it. But then we talked about, well, maybe you don't just look at your top choice. You actually rank all of the choices like vanilla and chocolate and strawberry. You didn't just pick your favorite, you ranked them. And with that more information, with that ranking, it turns out there are other ways that we can describe to try to find a winner of our election. And so today we're going to see 2 of these new ways to try to find a winner of the election. The plurality method is the way that you are most familiar with because that's what we do almost all the time. But today we introduce a way called the Borda method and something else called plurality with elimination. Again, the goal is just to say who won the election. We're going to do it differently than just looking at first place votes. The goal is to find a winner. And then we've got 2 more days after this one on more voting stuff. And then on the 23rd is our review for the test. And on the 28th is our test. Any questions on that? Okay, and I wasn't really planning on doing this now, but I just want to mention that 15% of your grade is going to be this project. And we haven't talked about the projects at all, and we're not really going to talk about them now, but if this is a time where you have some time, some availability to work on this math thing, and maybe you'll be busier in the midst of the semester when some folks are going to be working on it, it's not too soon to start thinking about the project. Like I said, we're not going to talk about it now, but I just want to point you in the direction of some information about these projects. If you go to page 42, can you find page 42? And in the middle of page 42, it says information on projects. And I promise you, I will never read this to you in class, and you won't read it to yourself in class, but there's information on the projects right there. So if this is a time where you want to start to get a sense of what these projects are about, have a look at that. If you go to the next page, it talks about citations. We're just going to skip to the next page again. And on page 44, you see the start of a list of suggested topics on the project. You could do this thing called putting numbers in perspective. You could do this thing on sequential voting. There's something about elections up in Burlington, Vermont. Most of these things have to do with voting. On the next page, you can talk about a different voting method. You can do something on the UN Security Council. Pretty much you're going to pick one of these topics. So again, if this is a good time for you to start thinking about it, read the information, look through the list of the topics, and start working on it. It's not too soon to start working on this project. All right, that said, let's jump back to page, I think we were on 21. Am I on the right page here? Yeah. Okay, so we'll start here at the bottom with number 1 in this section. Oh, and somebody remind me. I just saw this little note to myself, handout appendix 1. They're in my office, but I just need to go get them. So at the end of class, when you're working on the group thing, just somebody remind me that I owe you a document today. Okay, so we'll start with number 1. Can we go to Holly? Let's pause right there. Any college football fans in the room? Not a single fan of college football? Really? Okay, fair enough. But probably some of us have seen the college football rankings, right? Alabama is number 1 and Auburn is number 2 and all the rankings and stuff like that. Well, how do they rank them? They rank them according to a point system. And so if you go look, you look up this whole AP college football poll, you'll see these numbers. Alabama has 1,983 points. What does it mean? We're going to talk about what it means. Keep going, Holly. Okay, let's go to the next page. And we're up to Emma. Okay, let's actually skip down to this example here where we're going to do the board account method. So if there's 4 candidates, a first place vote is worth 4 points. So let's do part A here. We've got our preference schedule in the table, and we're going to do this thing called the board account to try to find the winner of this election. Let's pause for just 1 second before we do. Wadada? I thought you had a question. Okay. Who has the most first place votes? All right, so Justin is saying A has 2 columns, right? And C has 2 columns. What else does Justin need to look at? The number of voters in each column. So how many votes does A have altogether, first place votes? Has 12. How many does C have? 14. Who's the winner? C. Well, not necessarily. C is the winner if we only look at first place votes. But we're going to look at something completely different, okay? So untrain your mind to only see first place votes. So let's see if we can find the board of points for candidate A. Every first place vote is worth 4 points. 4 candidates, 4 points. How many first place votes does A have? There's 12. Each of those votes is worth 4 points. What do we do to find how many points they got total? Times it by 4. Thank you. Everyone agree? They have 12 votes. Each of them gets 4 points. Plus, now we're looking at A, second place votes. How many second place votes does A have? It's 1. And it's really 1. It's not just saying A is only in 1 column. Why is it really 1? Because in that column, you look up and you see only 1 person has voted for A in second place. So 1 second place vote. Up here, how much is the second place vote worth? 3. A little bit less than a first place vote. Plus, how many third place votes does A have? A has 9 third place votes. How much is each third place vote worth? 2. And then finally, how many last place votes does A have? A has 5, looking in the bottom row. And a last place vote is worth 1 point. So we'll crunch all these numbers together. Is that 74? Somebody don't take my word for it. Confirmed at 74. Any questions on the calculation? This looks very mysterious if you don't know where the numbers came from. So make sure that you know where these numbers came from. I'm going to highlight a pattern that maybe isn't obvious. Yeah, because they had 12 first place votes, but according to this Borda method, a first place vote is worth 4 points. So you guys see the 4, 3, 2, and 1, right? First place votes are worth the most. Then you count the second place votes, third place votes, fourth place votes. And we add them all up. 74 is how many points A has. Is that good? Who knows? We got to compare it to something, right? So what are you about to do? Do it for B and C and D. Okay, so I would encourage you guys to split the work up. Maybe one person at the table does B, somebody else can do C. So talk to each other so you're not all duplicating. Okay, so again, not expecting you to have had time to do all of them, but at least one. Are there any questions on how to do the one that you were working on?
I mean, that's my preference, but I don't really like the way you set it up like that. Just as like a long algebraic equation, but I just did like 22 times 3 equals, and then just add down a column.
Yeah, good.
It's kind of lengthy that way, like you don't have a calculator.
Right, right. Okay, so different ways. So Charlie's talking about how he wrote it maybe as a column instead of a row. So however you want to organize it is good. Any other questions or comments on the calculation? Justin?
Just making sure I got it. I feel like I do, but I feel like.
Well, it comes with practice, but here's the nutshell version again. A first place vote is worth 4 points. A second place vote is worth a little less. Third place, last place. And then you just count how many of each kind of vote the candidate has. Add them all up and you have your total.
So based on where the candidate is based on choice, you add up all of their wins in each choice category, and then you multiply it by the amount that is per.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's it. Everybody got what Justin said? He said it perfect. That's right. The places are worth different amounts of points. What if this was a 5-candidate race? Would you still give 4 points? First place is then worth 5. So the more candidates kind of changes the values of the points. But what is constant is that on the previous page, I think Holly said it. Where is it? 1 point for a last place vote. That's always the same. I don't care how many people are in the race. If you just start with last place and give them 1 point, you'll work your way up to the right number. And giving 0 points to last place is an alternative that gives the same outcome at the end. Good point. So who wins according to the Borda method? D wins. D wins because they have more points than anybody else. And this is exactly what happens when folks do the AP college football poll. You have all these sports writers who weigh in and they think, all right, I think Alabama's the first place team. The Alabama just got 25 points. If somebody else thinks Alabama is second, Alabama has 24 points for that vote. And you add all these voters up and you give a total, and that's how we rank teams in college football. Anybody notice anything surprising about D winning according to this method? Yeah, who is the plurality winner? You guys looked at first place votes. C was the winner according to first place votes. Even more than that, how many first place votes did D get? D got 0. This is very much anti to everything that we know about electing. Nobody thought that D was really, really awesome. Nobody was D was not anybody's top choice. But can you look at the Ds and figure out how they had a chance of winning this without any first place votes? What did most people think D was? Second best. And everybody else thought at least they're not the worst candidate out there. So D was second choice for a lot of people, and they were maybe the most approved of, the least objectionable candidate, and they won.
Actually, your college football example is probably the best because anybody who votes, regardless if they think they're the best team or not, they're gonna pick them first. You know, like say everybody's rabid like LSU, but really like Texas has a better team, they're gonna vote them second. So it's kind of like put your like predispositions aside. The second would actually be better team.
Yeah. And it's nice. I like what Charlie pointed out here that like every spot counts. Even if you put a first place choice because you're predisposed to thinking teams in the Northeast are the best, you got to rank everybody somewhere. And so your true preferences maybe will come out there someplace. Okay, let's go to B, and I think we're up to Henry. Okay, lots of words. The Borda count method is this thing that we just did with the points. The majority criterion we saw last time. I will say it, but hopefully it's starting to become more familiar as you've had a chance to do some practice over the weekend. The majority criterion says if somebody has a majority of first place votes, they should win. Did somebody have a majority of first place votes? Yeah. C. C had a majority of first place votes. And we actually need to write a tiny bit more to confirm that we did the right thing. How many first place votes did C get? 14. Yeah, don't we need to know how many there were total to know there was a majority? I can look at this and say that, okay, C has more than anybody. That's clear without doing anything else. But you need to have a majority for this criterion to be violated. Johannes says 27. Is that the right total? Okay, So that is a majority, right? 14 out of 27. So according to this majority criterion, if somebody has a majority of first place votes, they should win. I don't care how you decide who's going to win, but they should win. Well, C had a majority of first place votes. According to this Borda method, did C win? Nope. That is a violation. C had a majority of first place votes, but C did not win. So this is a good example to show that the Borda count method violates something that seems reasonable. If somebody gets a majority of first place votes, they should win. Here's an example that says that there's something lacking in this method of counting votes. Questions on that one? Okay, let's go to Zach for C. Okay, more vocabulary here. Condorcet Criterion. So again, it's another one of these long phrases that hopefully we're getting a little better at understanding. The Condorcet Criterion is as follows. If somebody beats everybody head to head, they should win. If somebody beats everybody head to head, they should win. Okay, but usually this is a lot of work to see if somebody beats everybody head to head. In theory, we have to do a comparison, A versus B, then a new comparison, A versus C, A versus D, B versus C, B versus D, C versus D. Lots of work. But actually, if you have a good handle on what's going on here, you should see that there's somebody who beats everybody head to head without doing a whole lot of work. Louder? What do we think? C has a majority of first place votes, right? They've already got 14 out of 27. So if I'm comparing, for example, C versus A, well, how many votes does C get? Let's see. Who wins the first column between C and A? A is above C, right? Who wins the second column between C and A? It's A again. Don't be fooled by the B that's in the top choice. We're only looking for A versus C. A has won that one. Who wins this column? C is above. Who wins this column? A. Who wins that column? C. The only ones that that C beat A is that one and that one, right? How many is that? 14. How many are left over for A if 14 is 13? Who just won between A and C? C won. And C is going to win every time, right? Like A did the best it could possibly do and it still lost, of course, because there's already 14 people that think C is better than everybody. Doesn't even matter what the other folks think. C has enough votes outright. So let's see if we can write this down. C is the Condorcet candidate. Because they beat everyone. Head to head. But who was the winner again using the Borda points? C was the winner. That's a problem. But C did not win. That's for a different class. Yeah. Yes, Alex. Yeah, so in theory, we should have to do everybody versus everybody. But we recognize that C has a majority of first place votes. That's unusual. But if it happens, there's a nice little shortcut. If we compare C versus A, I already know that these 14 people I've highlighted, they prefer C to everybody. So if I do C versus A, C already has 14 points, and they might even have some more if some other people think C is better than A. But 14 is enough because there's only 27 votes up there. So with only 14, C already has more than anybody else. It could be like 14 to 13, which is what it was here when we did A versus C. Those 14 people preferred A. The other 13 people preferred, those 14 people preferred C, and the other 13 preferred A, but who won that head-to-head? C won. And if I do B versus C, yeah, C is at the bottom, so everybody else thinks C is horrible, but these people think C is the best. And if you compare, you'll find out that C wins again. Not by much, but they win. And C is going to beat everybody without even looking at the rest of the table, because C already has a majority of first place votes. So those are the people that think C is better than anybody else, and that's enough to carry every head-to-head. Yes. Automatic. As soon as you have a candidate with a majority of first place votes, they are the Condorcet candidate. Yeah. Okay. This is a moment where, again, lots of vocabulary and different voting methods and stuff. And so I want to keep clear, we've got kind of these two trains of thought, but I want to make sure they're on separate tracks. We have different ways to try to figure out who the winner of an election is. This is one track over here. You have the data in the table. Your job is to find the winner. One thing you could do is look at first place votes only. That's what we've been doing in this country for a long time. That's the plurality method. Another thing you could do is this board point system. But that's one track where you look at the data and you find a winner, okay? Then we have this separate track that's kind of running parallel. And on the separate track, we're asking a different question. We're not asking who the winner is. We're asking, okay, if I look over here at this other track where people are picking the winners, is it fair what they're deciding on? The winner that they decided over here, is it fair? That's what this other track is. This track is that fairness criteria track. So we've got this thing called the majority criterion, this other thing called the Condorcet criterion. They have nothing to do with picking the winner of the election. These are things that come in after the fact. The election has already been run, people have voted, and we have found a winner somehow. Then after the fact, we look at the election and we decide if we think the outcome was fair. That's what these two things are talking about. So this majority criterion says, if somebody has a majority of first place votes, they should win. I don't care how you pick the winner. I'm just telling you who should win. It's the person with the majority of first place votes, if there is one. And in this case, was there a majority winner? Yes, it was C. According to the board of points, though, did C win? No, D was the winner. And so we had these two parallel tracks. The Borda method on the one track says, oh, D is the winner. That's it. Then looking back at the election, we got this other track to decide if that was fair. Majority criterion says, that wasn't fair. C had a majority of first place votes. They should have won. I don't care about the details. Whatever you do, you should end up with C as the winner. So I'm going to say this, I'll give this analogy again next class, but I think it's important to keep track. These two separate but related ideas. One track is just trying to find the winner of the election. The other track looks at what you did to find the winner and decides whether or not the outcome was fair. Is that okay as like a kind of keeping these ideas separate? Stick with it. I will tell you that when I was in your shoes and just seeing the vocabulary for the first time, it took me more than one time through the course before it was really clear in my mind what was happening. I hope for you guys that you get it before more than one time in the course. But for me, I was able to teach the course a few times, and like the second time, I was like, oh, I think I understand these words that I'm saying. And then the third time, okay, I got it now. So be patient with yourselves. It takes time. All right, let's move on to number 3. Just a little bit of background here on the history. Jocelyn? Thank you. Alex? Let's pause right there. Do we understand that sentence? How many times do you go to the polls? You go twice. Go. There's a lot of choices the first time. You vote for your favorite. How many people move on to the second round? Just 2. The top 2 vote getters. We're not ranking anymore. You just pick your favorite, just like we do here in the States. And then you go back to the polls. And now how many choices are on the ballot? Just those 2. And then you pick one of those 2. Go ahead, Alex. This is. Thank you. Blake? Okay, so this method that I'm describing here, it's on, which track is it on? Is it on the pick a winner track, or is it on the was it fair track? This is the pick a winner. This is how different countries pick a winner. And in terms of these 2 tracks, there are going to be 4 methods on this pick a winner track that I'm going to test you on. You have already seen 2 of them. Plurality, first place votes only, and the board of points we just did up above. This is a 3rd one, but it's not really part of the class. I'm just kind of showing it to you, okay? So we're not going to run an example. I'm just letting you know there's this method out here. But in terms of this method that we're not going to go into all the details of, we start asking ourselves, well, what are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? We're going to go to Zach. Can you tell us about this downside? Does that make sense as a strategy? You have somebody you really like, but you are quite confident they're going to make it to the next round. You want to make it easy for them when they get to the next round. So what might you do? You might throw your votes to somebody else, hoping to sneak in a weaker opponent into that second round, right? Okay, so does it actually happen, or is this just like a theoretical, here's what could go wrong? Here are the results. I don't know if you can read it in the back of the room. I'll make it a little bit bigger if you can't. You guys can't read that back there, can you? No. Okay, let's pull it up here then. Here are the results of the 2002 French presidential election. And that's good there. Okay, so lots of candidates in this election. I'll scroll down and show you all of the candidates for president in France. Fair enough. And it turns out that there were these 2 guys who everybody knew that it was going to be between these 2 folks. And one of them was Jacques Chirac, Rally for the Republic, and the other one was Lionel Jospin, Socialist Party. Everybody knew these 2 folks were going to make it to the end. But then it was going to be kind of a coin flip. The experts couldn't predict who was going to win between those 2 candidates. But it turns out those 2 candidates didn't make it to the end. And I will show you the numbers. We're looking here at the percentages. Jacques Chirac, he was first with almost 20% of the vote. Then this guy, Jean-Marie Le Pen, snuck in with 16.86, compared to the other favorite, Jospin, at 16.18. Quite close, right? But Le Pen just kind of snuck in. Now, it turns out that Le Pen is quite crazy, and the entire country of France recognizes that he's quite crazy. So when it came down to a choice between Chirac and Le Pen, who did they pick? They picked Chirac, and they picked Chirac in an overwhelming landslide. 82% of the country voted for Chirac, 17.79 voted for Le Pen. Just to give you a sense, Le Pen gained like 1%, right? The rest of the country who voted for these people down here had to vote for somebody, and they said, well, I'm not going to vote for the crazy guy. No, I'm not saying that this was an example of pushover voting, but by God, I believe it was. I mean, like, look at what France thought. Nobody else nobody else jumped onto the Le Pen bandwagon in the second round. I have to believe that some of these folks who were voting for Chirac said, well, hey, we're confident he's going to make it, but we don't want Jospin in there, so let's throw some votes to the crazy guy's way and just hope that he gets to the finals. Because anybody against Le Pen, I could run against Le Pen in France, and I would win if it was the finals. So this is one downside. One thing I would like to point out, and I think this is, again, super important given that this is an election year. Do you guys have a sense when we have elections here, like what percent of people go out and vote? What percent of eligible voters actually show up at the polls? About 20% is the number that's in my head. About 20% of the people who can go out and vote actually do. Let's take a look at how this went in France in 2002. Down here at the bottom, 71.6% of the country who was eligible to vote voted. That was in the first round. In the runoff, 80% of the country voted. That's how it should be. It is embarrassing that only 20% of us can make our way to the polls on an election. 20%. Yeah, I think presidential is around 20, and even, yes, it's very, very sad. Yeah, thank you. Anybody hear about this?
Yeah, it was incredibly low. I think it was like, I think it was 6,000. Yeah, 6,000 people showed up.
Out of a lot more than 6,000, I'm guessing. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, percentages are what we're after, but it feels like that's a very small percentage. So you know, I don't know that if I'm like preaching to the converted already, but like it is your obligation to go out and vote. If you are eligible to vote, go out and vote. It doesn't matter if it's cold out or if it's raining out. It doesn't matter if you don't have 10 hours to look at all the candidates and their platforms. Just take 5 minutes, go online, figure out who you think is the best for you. There are plenty of websites that will kind of break it down for you. You have 5 minutes to get educated about which candidate you think is the best, and then go out and vote. We should be doing a lot better than 20%. We should be up here at 80%, but 20% is not okay. A few years back when Ted Kennedy passed away, you guys remember there was a senatorial election to fill his seat here in Massachusetts? Yes? Do you guys remember what happened in that election? So Coakley. So Martha Coakley was the Democratic candidate here to take a seat that had been filled by the Democrat, Ted Kennedy. And Scott Brown was this Republican trying to snatch that seat, right? It wasn't a usual election because Kennedy passed away. And apparently Coakley had like a landslide victory and it was hers. And then some stuff happened and people talk about mismanaging the campaign. And Brown actually ends up taking that seat. And that election, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but roughly 20–25% of Massachusetts voters went out and voted for that. Why was that election of national importance? Okay. Becca, say it again.
It was like a big thing for the healthcare because if she won, then you would have like healthcare universal in America, and if she didn't win, then like Scott Brown said, like 90% of people in Massachusetts have healthcare, so it doesn't affect our state. So that's why people. That was a big thing for him. Yes.
So this was a nationally significant election because the Democrats had enough, yeah, they had enough of a cushion in Congress that they could pass anything that they wanted to. If they just voted along party lines, Democrats had enough to pass whatever they wanted to, including this national health care bill that was coming. But with that one switch, that one Democratic seat going to the Republican, Scott Brown, they went from being I don't know if this is the right word, but is it a supermajority? The Democrats would have had a supermajority if Kennedy's Democratic seat had been kept Democratic, but it went Republican. There's still a majority in terms of Democrats, but it wasn't enough to just pass everything.
Yeah,
and
they had 60 seats in the Senate. They went down to 59, which means that the Republicans could filibuster, which means that the filibuster is essentially like an infinite session where they can discuss it. Like it's meant to be a session where like talk about it further, but essentially they just had an infinite one, so they just talked about it. Essentially talked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and stopped anything from happening. Yeah.
That day I was in my sociology class and we were talking about it, and everyone there was like a senior except for me. And my sociology teacher told us not to go out and vote. He said, like, because it was embarrassing unless we knew what we were talking about. So he told us actually not to vote unless we looked up and we actually had a really strong opinion. So let's not go vote.
What do you guys think?
I thought that was kind of rude of him to say and unprofessional. Tell somebody not to vote unless you know, this you're right. I thought, and I thought it was rude.
Zach?
I think it makes sense. Right? It's not why they can vote up. Know that the person's saying. May say one thing, but people follow it. Nobody really needs out. So like, that's like just like changing it. So like, vote, always like well, vote.
Thank you. Jocelyn?
Also, kind of makes sense in a certain way because there are allowed to choose a candidate because they decide, well, he looks like a guy that I would have a beer with. Well, he looks like a competent guy on our country. That seems to be a lot. I was going through my philosophy. One of the instructors that made that observation. A lot of people their candidate choice during previous elections based on the person looked like they were based on the advertising, what were their credentials and what were their stance on the issue. Like I said before, a lot of people decide, hey, this guy looks like a pretty friendly guy. I'd like to have a beer with him. I'll vote for him to run our country, which is kind of faulty reasoning. So I think in some ways that sociology is kind of right in that you don't know you don't know who you're voting for and what their stances are on the issue, and you probably have a better chance of probably not voting in risk of getting a pretty bad candidate out there. But in another way, if you still have an idea, then you probably can look up more information to get a stronger opinion. I think a better way you could put that is if you don't know who you're voting for, find out, then vote instead of just don't vote. Because if you don't vote, then you're going to have 20%. You're going to have like 80% of the 20% of voting for the worst possible candidate. And really that seems to be an issue with like a lot of primaries right now. You have that majority of people who I should probably say don't really know what their candidates are saying or don't know what the candidates are their stances on the issue. Because I think a good example would be like Rick Perry, right? You guys all seen like Rick Perry Strong commercial.
Yeah. Okay. So all right. Let's come back on track a little bit here. But okay. So there's some support for this idea that if you don't know what the candidates are about, then you should not vote. So I've heard from 2 people and 1 teacher at another school. Other folks in this room, agree or disagree? If you don't know what the candidates are for, you should not vote. Yes. Phil.
I think it's interesting. Sociology. It would be interesting to see to any sort of candidate message that has any sort of substance to it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times because people feel that elections bring certain types of issues. So propaganda or appealing to values is because in a certain way that is what our culture has made elections about in this country. It's very hard to, maybe institute a system like we have certain countries in Europe, where it's every single candidate's allowed to be airtime in the national debate. Like even what's been focused on the current Republican primary has been behind entertainment value, things of that sort. So I think it's, how does one make themselves
Right.
when the information that is available to you is tainted because it's viewed as fodder for entertainment. Could put themselves in a particular team because of their opinions on certain value issues and not things that actually affect the government.
Right.
Statistics.
Right. Thank you. Yes. Everybody hear that? This is only for people that want to register as Republicans, right? But you're talking about voting in a primary. I see. Okay, so tomorrow's the last day to register to vote if you are not yet registered to vote. Thank you, Brian. Okay, Phil mentioned propaganda. There's certainly a lot of issues that are going on here, many of which are far afield from the math, and so we're going to come back to the math. But here's my propaganda. I would rather have 80% of the country go out and vote by flipping a coin to decide who they elect than to have the 20% of the people who think that they're knowledgeable or at least are motivated for one reason or another to go out and vote. It is our civic responsibility to become informed about the candidates and then pick who they think is the best, even if that means 5 minutes. Not expecting 10 hours of research on your part. Spend 5 minutes, pick who you think is the best. Just go out and vote. Okay. Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to number 5. Thank you for the discussion. Who was our reader? Zach, you read, right? Justin. Number 5. Yes.
Yet another voting method is fixed upon voting parity or plurality that fill out a perfect ballot once. Round 1, candidate has the majority first place votes. They have.
Okay, thank you. Brian, number 2, round 2. Thank you. Is it Ashley? Okay, lots of words, but the method here is simple. It's fairly simple. Again, we are on this track over here. We are finding a way to pick a winner of an election. This is the third way that we are going to describe, which you will be tested on to find a winner of an election. Everybody goes out, they vote once. This is not the French presidential election where you have a second vote and you go out to the polls again. You vote one time, you fill out your preferences. If somebody has a majority, they win, you stop. If nobody has a majority, you're going to eliminate somebody. It's called plurality with elimination. Who do you choose to eliminate? The one with the least number of first place votes, right? And once we eliminate that person with the least number of first place votes, well, maybe they had some first place votes, just not enough. Well, those first place votes they used to have, they're going to go to the next candidate on the list. And then you recalculate. And if somebody has a plurality of, a majority, then we stop. Otherwise, we drop the next person with the least number of votes. Let's see if we can do this in number 6. We're up to Hillary. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. We've seen these numbers before. Round 1. So we're looking for first place votes only. R, D, and G. How many first place votes or what percentage of first place votes does R have? 45. D, 40. And G, 15. If we are just doing plurality, who won? R. They have more than anybody else. Do they have a majority? No, they do not have more than half. So if we have this plurality with elimination business, we need to eliminate somebody. So who gets eliminated from these candidates? It's G, the person with the fewest number of first place votes. Eliminate G. And so we're going to eliminate G. I'm going to cross G off everywhere in my table. You don't need to do this, but I will just to really show you that G is gone. And any place that G was, people below get moved up a spot. And so we're going to recount first place votes only. R equals, D equals. Okay, who gets the first column? R, still. Who gets the next column? R, still. Who gets the next one? Still D. The next one? Still D. Here's where things are going to change. This next column, right here, who did they think was the best before? They thought G was the best, but G has been eliminated. We don't ask these folks to vote again. We have their preferences. It's clear. That's the preference right there. Who do they think is second best? D. Those votes now go to D. Those are now first place votes for D because everybody moves up to fill the void. So let me highlight the first place votes for D. It's that one, that one, that one. Who gets the last two votes? R is preferred there. So we will highlight R as first place votes. And then we will recount. How many does R have? 47 and 53. If somebody has a majority, you stop. Does somebody have a majority? Yes. B wins with a majority. Questions on this method? This method is called plurality with elimination. Why is it called plurality? It's first place votes that we care about. Why is it called with elimination? Because you eliminate until you find a majority winner. That's right. Okay, so we see the description, right? Plurality with elimination. The other phrase also makes sense. Instant runoff voting. A runoff is where you have like an extra round, you know, just between the top two people or something, right? So there was a runoff. Who was the runoff between? R and D. Okay, fine. Why is it called instant runoff? You don't need another vote. This isn't the French presidential election where you vote again. This is an instant thing. And in fact, if all these ballots are stored in the computer, really in an instant, you could just find your winner. You'd eliminate G, and the next moment you'd say, oh, okay, D is the winner. You don't like this method, why not? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. So here's the real question that we need to get at to try to convince Phil that this is a reasonable thing, or to convince him that this is not a reasonable way to count the votes. Suppose that we just vote, and we know that we're doing this, and then G gets eliminated, but now we go to the polls again. So really the only question is, how are people going to vote? Well, the people that thought R was the best, what are they going to do now that G is out of the picture? Probably still going to think R is the best. And the people that voted for D before, they're still going to vote for D. So really the question is, these 15 people over here, what are they going to do? Well, we're making an assumption. And the assumption is that given that G is out of the picture, that these 13 people here that thought D was second best, they're going to think that D is still better than R. So we are making this assumption. The assumption that we're making, I think, has a fancy word. It might be called, I don't want to say the wrong word, it might be called the transitive property. That if you think A is better than B and B is better than C, then you think A is better than C. And I think that's what we're assuming about these folks. So for you to decide whether or not you like this method is really asking the question, do you believe that those 13 people are going to pick D over R if those are the only two choices? And if you think that this is a sincere way to count the votes, then the method should find us a good winner. Justin.
They just kind of pick up the
Mm-hmm.
here where they could be right. Because someone says, I want you in there. And then they're like, the hell with Mitt or Rick, whoever, I'll just
Right. Yeah, I think there's some connections there between this kind of elimination and then votes going somewhere else. Yeah. Alex? this is exactly a head-to-head thing. Ultimately, these 13 people had to decide head-to-head between D and R. They thought G was the best, but that didn't matter because G was eliminated. So really head-to-head D versus R. That's what the difference was. Is these folks here. Good observation. All right. There is another voting, another fairness criterion. This is the other track. We're not going to read it. You're going to read it later on. I just want to make sure there's enough time for you to do some calculations in your groups. So we're going to skip ahead. I just want to point out this table. This table is almost finished. Remember I had said we were going to have how many different voting methods? We've seen 3. We're going to have 4. The last one is coming next class. Here are the 3 we've seen so far. Plurality, plurality with elimination, and the board account. That's the one track. On the other track are going to be these things to decide whether the first track was fair. There are also 4 of these. Doesn't have to be the same number, but it happens we're studying 4 of these ones as well. We have seen 2 of them, the majority criterion, the Condorcet criterion. The one that we just skipped, which you're going to read over in a minute, is called the monotonicity criterion. All I want to do is point out, this whole satisfies and violates thing. So what does it mean to say that the plurality method satisfies the majority criterion? It means that in any election, no matter how many candidates you have and no matter how people vote, the majority criterion will always be satisfied if you're counting the votes using this plurality method. To say that the plurality method violates the Condorcet criterion doesn't mean it's going to be a violation in every single election. It means that in some elections, there will be a violation. It has the potential to, okay? So satisfies means all the time. Violates means it has the potential to violate. All I want to point out is that what do you notice about every row? None are perfect. That's what we've got so far. Now we are going to introduce another voting method next class, but at the moment, none of these methods satisfies all 3 of our fairness things. All right, and the last thing, just in case you're wondering how, like how this might look, because when we go to the polls, we just pick our top choice. You fill in one bubble and you're done. But I just want to show you, it is quite easy to have a ranking kind of thing. And in fact, just up in Burlington, Vermont, this is how they elected their mayor for a little while. Back in 2006, this is how they elected their mayor. And it's quite easy to do. You fill in the blanks with your first choice, and then you fill in another bubble for your second choice. I just want to point out that you can have a bubble sheet, which is very fast to read by a little machine, and it's quite easy to fill this thing in and give your preferences, right? I'm just showing you this so that you see that there are other ways out there besides just pick your top choice and that's all. It's quite easy to do this kind of thing, and it's very fast to read this kind of thing if you have the machine. All right, can you guys go to the very next page and see how far you can get on the questions there? And I think there should be an answer key that follows.